Okay. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining. There's some great turnout for a Zoom webinar, as far as I know. It's the first time I've ever done one. We're working on getting one of our panelists connected in. Hopefully that'll come through in a little bit. Just working out a few technical glitches. My name is Eric Peterson. I'm the president of the board of the Utah Headliners, chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. And okay, there's Chuck. It says Jennifer, but okay,
you're showing
good.
up under my name, but it's okay.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
that's cute.
okay, we'll just get started. Thanks again, everyone, for taking the time to join our webinar covering coronavirus in Utah. I never thought I would be moderating a panel from a closet in my basement, or as I like to call it, the news dungeon, but here we are. These are unprecedented times, and that's exactly why we are doing an event like this. Before I introduce our panelists and get started, I just wanted to go over a few things. As I mentioned in the email for attendees, since this is in the webinar format, you guys are all on mute, but you have the option of sending questions through the chat function at the bottom there. There's also the Q&A, so you can send a question anonymously if you'd like to do that. And we'll, we're gonna try and find some time later at the end of the thing to go over some of those questions. Couple other announcements I want to make sure everyone is aware is that we are having our contest, our SBJ contest is open now. Deadline is April 24th to submit some of your best work for the calendar year 2019. Annual competition includes a wide range of news writing, television, radio, magazine, online categories. Go to contest.utahspj.com to review and create an account and start entering. It's very affordable. Contest entries are $10 for SPJ members and students and $15 for non-members. We'll also be taking nominations for our special honors categories, and that includes the Sunshine Awards for transparency and the Black Hole Awards. Those nominations are all free. And you can join our Utah Headliners chapter by going to spj.org/join. Also wanted to kind of get started. If I can master this share screen option, I wanted to just put up real quickly before we get in a little slide, and we can send this out to everyone on the list afterwards. But I'm starting to collect kind of a list of links of different resources for journalists who are covering the pandemic, and we'll add to this as time goes on. But I just wanted to show a few resources that are helpful. I found, I don't know if you can see all this. I don't know if you're aware of the Facebook Journalism Project. They're doing grants right now. They've got a deadline to April 24th. And that's not just to help cover the coronavirus. It's to help newsrooms that are having revenue shortfalls and things like that. National Geographic Society, they've got grants right now, and it's on a rolling application basis for covering the pandemic in your community. It's interesting. Solutions journalism stories. There's a whole list of stories that are on a Creative Commons license, and they're related to the pandemic and things there that you can republish on your site. You just got to give credit. And real quick, another couple things I found interesting lately in terms of finding experts, since everyone is trying to get some kind of infectious disease expert, public health experts. I don't know if you've visited the site sciline.org. It's very cool. You can make a request for a particular scientist, and they'll kind of play matchmaker. But they've also got a whole new thing that's just resources for covering COVID-19. They've got this cool localizable infographic showing the coronavirus cases in your state and other useful resources. And on the subject of finding experts, another really cool site you should check out is called diversesources.org. And it's kind of the same thing, except they focus on finding you underrepresented voices in the scientific community. I actually just had a story the other day where I was trying to find someone who knew about the science of essential oils, and as a bonus, if they had any expertise in epidemiology, and they found a woman that had expertise in both those things. It was super helpful for a story I was working on. So we'll make that available to everyone else, and we're going to add links to this as things go on. There's a lot of resources that are kind of being made available all the time for journalists trying to cover this crazy situation. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists and get started. So we have George Severson. He's the Director of Local Programming and Creative Services for Nexstar Media Group's ABC and CW affiliates in Salt Lake City. Say hi, George.
Hello, everybody.
And we got Chuck Wing, is the Managing Editor of Cross-Platform News for the combined Deseret News and KSL newsroom, and oversees the Deseret News photo staff. Not to be confused with Jennifer Napier-Pearce, despite the label there. And Jennifer Napier-Pearce is the editor of the Salt Lake Tribune, Utah's largest daily newspaper and the first legacy daily newspaper in the U.S. to transition from a for-profit company to a nonprofit. We're also joined by Bubba Brown. He's been the editor of the Park Record since 2017. Previously, he covered education and business for the Twice Weekly paper. He's also worked as a reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune and the Standard Examiner. And also we have Shoel Cardenas. He's the breaking news editor for KSL.com, the most visited local news website in Utah. Shoel's resume includes Deseret News, Yahoo, The Telegraph in London, and Fox Deportes. Thank you all so much for joining us. Just to get things started, I'm going to try and kind of stump the panelists right out the gate with the most difficult question and answer, which is, what is the new normal? I can't keep track anymore. We're over a month into stay-at-home orders and sheltering-in-place recommendations, when it seemed like only a month and a half ago, the biggest thing everyone was talking about was impeachment and elections. So we'll get into more particular details later, but just starting off, I want to ask the panelists broadly, what is the biggest change you've seen in coverage and in your newsrooms since the pandemic hit? George, do you want to start us off?
Oh my gosh. Eric's not a gentleman. He should have had Jennifer go first. But I'm sure, first and foremost, I don't know about you guys, but that new normal term is just grates on me. I'm sick of it, tired of it. It's kind of like the in these uncertain times and all those kind of other phrases that are just grating on us. We're in the news business. We should be used to the unusual. I mean, breaking news is a big thing that we do and we respond to it. I personally feel like, and I feel like, I'm no longer the news director, so I can't speak from that perspective, but I work very closely with our news department still, and our news team. But I feel like we're in constant breaking news mode right now. It's very similar to, and I'm sure everybody's heard this, and those of us that are old enough to be in the business and remember when 9/11 struck, I felt like we've been living those first 3 days for a month now. So for me, I just feel like the new normal is normal. I happen to be one of those, our staff here of about 200, a little over 200 people that work here at the ABC4 CW studios. We're down to about 20 to 25 people in the building on a daily basis. I happen to be one of them, so I'm the guy that shows up here to greet guests. We don't let people in the building, but we have a studio in the back. And so, if I was going to say my new normal as far as how do I do my job is with a mask and gloves. But for the most part, I feel like, we're journalists and we're in the business of responding and reacting and covering things that just aren't ever normal. So that's kind of my thought.
What about you, Jennifer?
The biggest change for us is no donuts. No,
I have some for you here.
no constant chatter around the water cooler. I miss the camaraderie of my colleagues a lot, just, shouting across the newsroom or whatever. That has taken adjustment. I do take George's point to heart, though, that the news, we've always adapted, we've always innovated, we've always made do with whatever resources we have. So in that regard, that hasn't changed. But I do think that the physical distance that I experience, we're all remote now. We don't have anyone in the newsroom. And that is a different dynamic. And in previous lives, I've gone through a freelance phase and worked from home, but it's just not having the energy and camaraderie that is immediate in any newsroom. I miss that a lot.
What about you, Bubba? What's the new normal in Park City?
Yeah, kind of bouncing off what Jennifer said. It's really strange not to be in a newsroom. I mean, we're a small newsroom. We have an editorial staff of 8, including me, and so all of us every day we're normally in and just chatting and right in the same room almost. And so now to be remote is really strange. But maybe the biggest difference in terms of our news coverage is just the fact that in our newspaper twice a week and online, there's almost no coverage that is not coronavirus related. We've had to make some pretty drastic decisions in terms of prioritizing certain coverage and stuff that we would typically be covering at any other month, any other at this time of year. We're just not covering stuff that is typically our role and typically our job because we don't have the resources to cover much beyond kind of the new breaking things that are coming at us every day with the coronavirus. So to me, that's been one of the biggest changes, is just how much of our focus is centered on one story as opposed to kind of the variety of stuff that we typically cover.
Yeah. What about you, Chuck? What's the new normal for you?
The new normal for me, I think one thing I've learned personally is I've kind of become a warrior. I didn't realize how much of a warrior I was, but when it comes to my staff safety, I worry constantly. We have morning chats with everybody during the day, constant chats on Zoom or on Slack or Teams. But my new normal is real personally is just being hyper sensitive to what our crews are going into and how they're telling their story and being safe going about it. So it's a continuous worry.
Yeah. Shoel, how about you?
For me, since we rely a lot on Slack, our team to begin with, even when we're in the newsroom, it hasn't been as difficult as I thought it would be in the sense of just the communication, because we've done it anyway with Slack all the time, even if we were 4 feet apart in the newsroom. Obviously, I do miss my teammates tremendously, seeing them and being able to communicate with them in person, in particular, my breaking writers, managing them and telling them just in person what needs to be done, and just even going over to their computer and seeing what they're doing and adjustments, etc. Those things like that, I do miss. It takes a little bit more. I always have to be a couple of more steps ahead. It's always in the past been maybe be 1 step ahead or 2 steps ahead, but now I feel like I need to be 5 steps ahead as far as even what we're writing, what we're going to alert, what we're going to look for the next day, etc. Things like that. So it's been stressful to say the least, like I think for everybody. But at the same time, I think just because since particularly for our site, we've been doing breaking, that's our main focus. We've always kind of been ready for that. So maybe not to this scale, but it's been those little things that we've done for years now that we've been building up as far as, I guess, building up our muscle on how we cover breaking news has led to us transitioning to this and doing the best we can.
So I was also really interested to know how everybody is dealing with shifts in terms of changes in coverage, filling in the gaps, like in covering sports and arts and entertainment. These things, they've just kind of gone away. How do you still try and cover these beats, these kinds of things? And how are you kind of like putting some of those reporters and people to work when it's kind of a beat that's disappeared? Jennifer, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, you might hear my dog, just so you know.
It's the new normal, Jennifer.
It's the new normal. So true. Yeah, when you have sports and arts that are very events-based beats, that makes it really difficult. You've got to get a little bit more creative. It has affected our print product for sure. We've eliminated a daily sports section. We folded that into our main A section. On the weekends, we've shortened on occasion our arts coverage. We're still doing a lot of features coverage because that aspect continues to go on. But as far as reallocating staff resources, we've actually repurposed our jazz beat writer who has a background in math. He was like a statistician in a previous life, and now he is our coronavirus data guy. Andy Larson's doing a great job on that. And our other sports reporters are covering breaking news. Our arts and features people, everybody's covering breaking news because that's where the need is. And so, I've been really amazed at how flexible people can be and taking on new challenges with a pretty determined and open attitude. This is the world we live in. So what can we do to help? I have some of my assistant copy editors doing breaking blog kind of editing duties. So everybody sort of shifted, and so far so good. I mean, fortunately, we have not had to lay anyone off. People are very open and flexible to new duties and new challenges. And I think that's really inspirational, to be honest.
Yeah. How about you, Bubba? How has that kind of coverage whole affected what you guys do up in Park City?
Yeah, for one, in our print edition, typically we run three sections: an A section, a sports section, and an arts section. And we folded the arts and sports section into one section now. And our arts reporter, we've kind of shifted him into kind of cover general assignment, features, human interest, covering what nonprofits in Park City are doing to contribute relief and what some small businesses are doing to kind of stay afloat. And so we've kind of shifted him into just covering kind of the gaps that our news reporters aren't able to necessarily get to. Our sports reporter, we unfortunately had to furlough for a couple of weeks. We were able to bring him back yesterday, along with a copy editor who we had furloughed. And so we're trying to find in the sports section any coronavirus related types of coverage. We've had up here winter sports athletes who had their seasons cut short, obviously prep sports, senior athletes who no longer have a chance to finish their high school careers or compete for a state championship. And so we're just trying to find the best way possible to cover it from a sports perspective and with acknowledging that, number one, no sports are going on, and number two, it's impossible to treat the sports section as business as usual because that's just not the reality that's happening right now.
Yeah. What about you, Chuck? What are you seeing with some of the people that, I mean, you might have usually assigned to these kinds of events? Are they just keeping busy with other coronavirus related work, or?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Bubba and what Jennifer said, we've gone down, in pages on the sports section, but the sports reporters, features reporters are covering things that are virus related. A feature story today in the sports section about the bees and keeping up with the the stadium there. So that was our big print centerpiece and our I guess our centerpiece on web this morning as well. So they're trying to dig for stories that of how the sports world is coping with the virus, with everything being shut down, and same with our features department. Features department is a lot smaller than sports is, but nonetheless, they're still hitting the ground trying to find the stories that are impactful to our readers, and especially when it comes to the arts and eating out and that kind of thing that are so important to our society.
Yeah. What about you, George?
So I think broadcast is a little bit of a different beast from print. Just going into the staffing situation, if you look at it, what I find really funny is for us here in Utah, the coverage of the virus started as a sports story technically. And so our sports team was really mobilized and utilized big time from the beginning. And then for those of us that have like medical correspondents or experts on our staff, they've really had to step up. In the past, maybe they contributed 1 or 2 things a week or maybe a small little story a day. They've really taken a center stage now. So that's, that's what's so great about having, a diverse staff with different focuses and skills and beats and things like that. And that's why we have beats, is so that we cultivate these resources and we go, we have people that are ready to do it when it's their moment to shine. It's like a basketball team or a football team. Not one player is the star. We all are working together. And so we support each other. And like everybody else has pointed out, when you're not the key player at that moment, you shuffle to do other things to support those other people. Like with sports is a big deal now because people are still craving sports content. So now we're going to legacy sports stories and just the, retro stuff. And I think that's also to help, I don't know if you guys categorize these things, tragedies or big, huge news events in this ways, but there's, this is kind of an old journalism thing where there's phases, and the first phase is, being solemn or your immediate response. The second phase is now we're going into supportive and uplifting. And then the third phase will be when we can finally be triumphant. We've beat this thing, or wow, we all came out on the other end. Right now, I think we've shifted about a week or so ago from that solemn and just the emergency, the urgency, to a blend of that with the uplifting and supportive, trying to keep people's spirits up, keep them informed at the same time. So I think it takes your whole team, and we've been fortunate as well to not have to furlough or lay anybody off, to just keep focusing on content. Because as you guys, as print or media or radio or whatever, we all still have content that we have to fill and put out there. So the really cool thing is there's a whole lot of content right now. We just got to figure out how to do it. To address the whole issue of staffing, what we've done is, for safety reasons and preventive precautionary reasons, we've split up our team into like the blue team and the green team. Blue team is working remotely 100% of the time this certain week, while the green team is working remotely 60% of the time, and then they come in 40% of the time to make sure that we have, in our business, we obviously have to have technical people here working from our studio, our directors and a producer. You can do some of it remotely, but at the bottom line, we still have to have engineers here and do certain things out of the building. So we've kind of shuffled people around and just accommodated shifts and gone from having a full team doing a newscast to maybe going down to a few people, and then shuffled some of our people that mostly usually do broadcast to now working on digital full time. So just being flexible, I think, is the biggest thing, and looking at what the needs are for filling our news cycle news needs.
Yeah, that's a good segue, I think, into, we should talk more, everybody on the panel, a little bit about just, what you're kind of doing, like George had brought up about, kind of different teams. How are you keeping your people safe? And especially, if you're like, you're involved in taking people, kind of on the on scene, to coverage of things that are happening out there. Maybe Chuck, do you want to start off with that? I mean, you got photographers heading out into the world while there's a lot of us, that are doing our reporting in our pajamas. How do you keep your people safe? What kind of guidelines do you guys put in place?
So there are a couple of really important things I think that we've done. The first one is every photographer, and quite frankly, I would think that this would apply to the reporters too, but the photographers are out there a lot, clearly a lot more. They have an opt-out. So if there is any reason whatsoever that they're not comfortable with a particular situation that they're covering, they have the opt-out. There's no judgment. They can call myself or whoever's photo editing and say, hey, this doesn't feel right, or I need to shoot this a different way, or I just, whatever. We completely respect, their decision, and they can opt out of that. And like I said, there's no judgment. The other thing we do is we mandate that we put this policy in place a couple weeks ago. Before they go into any private home or business, we ask them to touch base with the photo editor and just go over the risk versus reward. I mean, is this something that can we photograph this from outside? Can we photograph this through a window? Can we, is there some other way to document this visually that we haven't thought of without increasing the risk to either the subject or the photojournalist or journalist? So those are a couple things that I think are really key that we've implemented. Obviously, all of our field crews, TV, radio, and Deseret News have masks, gloves, spray, all the stuff that they need. Some of our photographers even have full suits that they've put together over the years, kind of their little disaster kits that they have. So we do have the capability to go into some places that maybe it seem a little risky, but we even talked about this yesterday in a Zoom staff meeting where we discussed that. Is it really worth the risk sometimes to go in and say, document a patient with the COVID-19? Is that something that we really want to chance? It's something I think all of us will have to deal with at some point in time. So just some of the things that we're trying to do to keep the photographers and the reporters safe. We, on the TV side, we do, they're driving separately. They're no longer driving together. We try and oftentimes pair the same crews together just so they can, if they are working together and they do happen to be exposed, we can pull those folks out of the mix to get the treatment that they need. But we're just trying to minimize those risks and those exposures as much as possible.
So, Shoel, you probably are working with some of the same folks. I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add in there about what your team, kind of communicates to people who are reporting breaking news.
When it comes to going on the scene, since we don't go too often at times, we went, when this first started, we were going to the 1 o'clock daily pressers, but obviously that has changed as well. So, but we've always just told them obviously to keep their distance, even before the whole 6 feet, just having them just be careful. And if they felt like they didn't feel like they wanted to go, they could just, obviously everything's being live streamed. They had the option of doing that. So for us, it's kind of business as usual to an extent of like, we depend a lot on the streaming aspect of it because since our crew is not necessarily the biggest, but at the same time, we have our partners that we get information from and we get resources from. So that includes Deseret News, and that includes KSL TV as well. So for us, it hasn't affected us that much, but the times that we have gone on scene, it's definitely, whether it's from our news director to our general managers, straight from the top has always been safety first, and kind of like Chuck was saying with his people as well. There's always been that option of, if you feel comfortable going, if you feel like you'll do better with this as far as with the job than attend the presser. But if not, it's streaming, and we'll be fine.
Yeah. What about you, Bubba? I mean, seems like Summit County was really maybe our first hotspot. How did you kind of like address safety with your staff?
Yes, so we transitioned to working remotely pretty early on. It was, I think, the Monday after our first case, which I think was maybe 5 days after the first case. We all started working from home, and so that came very early on. And at this point, our photographer is the one who is most often going out into the field. And it kind of echoing what Chuck, what you said, is we've made sure that any assignment, she's got to feel comfortable photographing it. We're not going to put her in any unnecessary risk or any danger, and for her or the subjects that she's shooting. And another thing we found when trying to shoot portraits or other shots like that is we've been very proactive about talking with subjects beforehand, letting them know that we're going to maintain the social distancing and do whatever that they're comfortable with to make sure that they feel safe. Because we were a little bit worried that subjects for photos would be really apprehensive of having their photos taken or having another person around them. And so we've been able to set people's minds at ease a little bit by having those conversations beforehand, and have actually had a lot of success with people. We have not found a lot of people who have been unwilling to let us photograph them when they know that we're going to do whatever's necessary to keep them and ourselves safe.
Yeah, that would seem to be pretty important. Some extra communication there with your photo subjects. And Jennifer, what about you guys at the Trib?
Pretty much the same, masks and gloves. I mean, we just got another shipment in yesterday because I think this is where we are for a while. Most of the concern is around our photo staff. They have to go out, so they're using a lot of long lenses. They are shooting people through windows. They're shooting people on their porches and keeping a very safe distance. I mean, I think, again, there's a burst of creativity. How can we still tell this story that's really important to tell, and stay safe? Because that is the prime directive. Everybody knows that safety comes first, and it's really just a balancing act on the duty of the journalist to tell the story, because we are the first draft of history, and we want to document all facets of life, how this pandemic is really affecting people's lives in 2020. To Chuck's point, lots of conversations, right? I mean, you get a great story idea. How do I cover this safely? How do I make sure that it is a story worth telling? Right now, my photo staff, they're not going into anyone's private homes. They are trying to figure out other ways to document, and that's resulted in some different kinds of conversations. Why can't I go do this? There are reporters that you have to hold back and tell them, look, we need to do this story, but you have to stay safe, because in the long run, this is not worth risking your life. So those kinds of conversations are happening too. I think that's for the foreseeable future. We just have to continually communicate and balance safety with the need to tell the story.
Yeah.
And how we tell that story.
Yeah. George, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to add since we're focusing on safety.
I think everybody's, you've saying the same thing. One of the unique things that our facility and station is doing is we're trying to keep our productions and our programming as normal as possible. We're not shutting anything down. So for like a show like Good Things Utah, that relies a lot on guests. And we've had to get really creative and on how we do segments. And also with the forefront of our mind is protecting our staff and also protecting the people out there that may not be thinking about, they might be panicking going, I've got to keep my business going. And they're freaking out about how do I stay in business and not go under, I'm going to risk and go out and do this or that. So we've created a couple different ways, and as we're doing right now, everybody's gotten very used to using digital modes of doing interviews or having people record segments. Quality has gone out the door, and we're just like, hey, just go and shoot yourself on a video and show us that great recipe and send it to me. I don't care how crappy the quality is. Let's just do it. You know, that's not true. We do care about the quality. We try to get people to do as best as possible. Chuck will probably be like, oh God, don't do that. But so that's one of the things is we're more open to things that we weren't 2 months ago on getting content. Here we've created a sanitized, well, this is when I first joined, I had this on and my gloves and my hat, because I was just a few minutes before we started, I was greeting a guest who came in to do a segment for our newscast for later today and Good Things Utah for tomorrow. And we have a outdoor sanitized isolated studio set up in, it looks like we're throwing a wedding here at Channel 4, and a big event tent out to the back with, it's technically no touch. There's no contact. We have boom mics everywhere. We have lights and everything. It's been set up. It was set up in that original snowstorm we had that first week when we all kind of went into isolation and everything. Our guests check in here. They get their temperature taken. They can't come in our building. They get it taken right outside the front door. They get told to go sit off to the side and wait in a car until George the bellhop comes and knocks on their window and says, come on in, let's go. And we just shuffle them in, and we do it that way. And a lot of people say that that's been very beneficial because it still lets them know, get the message out that they're open. We've had candidates for governor, politicians using that. You know, it lets them have a live Q&A session versus it's something similar that in broadcast world we're used to, because that's how our reporters talk to our anchors back in the studio. It's how, you know, if Chuck Schumer's in Washington, D.C., how, you know, George Stephanopoulos or somebody who might be in New York talks to him via satellite or the, you know, IFB. So there's just things like that. We've created a safe physical distance. I don't even like saying social distancing. I think we've all kind of tired of that. Physical distancing for precautionary tales and everything. And then a lot of the same procedures that you guys have talked about are things that we've had to implement as well. I'm curious, Chuck, with you guys, like we stopped immediately. We won't go into medical facilities, press conferences, like you guys were saying, it's really up to how many people are even allowed in the room or what's the spacing situation. But we'll live stream. But yeah, we won't put ourselves into any danger whatsoever for the sake of a story. And I think the world and our audiences understand that. And so everybody's a little forgiving right now and saying, you know, that wasn't the best video quality, or gosh, the audio sounded a little tinny there or whatever. And we're no longer embarrassed for it. I have to think that our next year's SBJ awards are going to be very interesting to see what kind of caliber of quality content. Oh, what are we supposed to enter those SBJ awards again?
George, you're right though. I mean, on the TV side, so much more of the interviews are being conducted, you know, via Skype or FaceTime or Zoom or whatever. And I think that's probably across the board as far as the different platforms go. And I think that's just acceptable. You know, we see the morning news network news shows, you know, all doing it remotely. You know, we've started, some of the anchors on the KSL side have got makeshift studios in their basements now that they're capable of doing segments from their homes. And I think that's just going to become, you know, kind of the norm.
Another new normal, right?
Yeah.
I had a question from our attendees. We have several, you know, student journalists who are, you know, just getting the hang of this, you know, pandemic journalism on top of everything else, and kind of asking about, you know, like what are some like practical tips and tricks for doing reporting and interviewing from home. I don't know. Bubba, do you want to start that one?
Sure. One tip that I can offer is I always tell this to people just starting out, trying to hone interview skills and kind of learn how to do it. Is that an in-person interview beats a phone interview 100% of the time, because you're able to see body language, you're able to see how they're reacting to certain questions, and it's a lot easier to ask smart follow-up questions when you kind of can read the signals that they're sending. And so I guess I would say encourage reporters to try and do a Zoom or a Skype or some sort of a video interview over a phone interview when possible, because obviously getting coffee with a source or meeting up at someone's office is not possible right now. But there's still ways to kind of accomplish interviews in the next best way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess that's something that well, just another thing I have to communicate to sources to say, hey, let's meet by Zoom. Figure out a way to make that seem comfortable for them. What do you think, Jennifer? What practical tips and tricks? Anything you would recommend for student reporters?
Be prepared. I mean, that is pre-COVID. It is post-COVID. It is now. Always go into an interview. Don't try and fish around. Respect people's time. And I do think I love the Zoom idea. Particularly because you can record it. So if you're just starting out, sometimes beginning reporters are nervous about getting that quote just verbatim. Having the recording there gives you the safety net that you need. So I would agree with Bubba that Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts, whatever, is a really effective tool to be able to communicate with the person that you're trying to, but don't underestimate the value of email still. I mean, that's still a thing. Text is still a thing. I think you can be creative when you're doing your projects and not be afraid. I think that student journalists sometimes especially in this environment, they're not going to have time for me. Don't underestimate people. I think that sources are willing to talk, they want to share, and especially, if they know this is for a school project, they're willing to mentor you.
Yeah. What about you, Shoel? Any recommendations you would give for students starting out under these difficult circumstances?
Yeah, one thing that I would definitely recommend is don't be shy to ask not just a follow-up question, but to clarify. I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to breaking news, we get that sense of like, okay, let's get the quote and let's just get the ball rolling so I could put it for the story because I need it for a certain time. But if you're not sure, don't be afraid to just hesitate and ask. And if somebody, I guess I'll give some random example. If somebody says, I enjoy my coffee in the morning, and they're like, okay, it sounds like they're a big coffee fan. So just say, you could say something, is it safe to say that you're a big coffee fan or you love your coffee or whatever like that? Just little things like that so you can get that, especially if you're not able, obviously, to do maybe a Zoom interview or nothing, or you can't see kind of, to like Bubba's point, like you can't see the body language, you can't see what they're trying to express. Just go ahead and ask that follow-up question. Just say, so you're saying this, or is it safe to say this? Some sort of format where you can get that confirmation one, because that is important. And we obviously don't never want to assume. And so you want that clarification. So just don't be afraid to ask that. It's not a dumb question. I know it might come off at times like, oh, this is going to be such a dumb question to ask, but just do it. You have to get it right. That's the most important thing over being quick, over being anything else. It's getting it right.
It's interesting, this idea of, asking sources to do Zoom interviews. It is kind of one of those things that can perhaps, especially if you're just starting out, maybe feel a little bit awkward, but in other circumstances, I often advise people, students or other reporters, if there's something they need to ask a source or they feel a little uncomfortable, just blame your boss. Just say, hey, my editor says that we've got to do Zoom interviews. I know it's a little awkward, but
we're here to take the hit.
Yeah, let them take the hit for you on that.
Eric, I would add too, for students, I think there's, and you mentioned this, there's so many resources out there. With our industry, there are people they're posted on Facebook. They're, whether it's SPJ or editor and publisher or Pointer or National Press Photographers, there's a lot of information out there that students can get their hands on really easily and read up on what folks are doing. I mean, quite frankly, I'm trying to do that as much as possible to know what my counterparts are doing in different parts of the country.
Yeah. Good. George?
So I think to that point too, I think the best advice right now to students is to really take this opportunity and go after it, because look how dependent we are on technology now and social media and all the things that okay, I'm 50 and I'm trying to keep up on learning all the the new things and everything, TikTok and all that jazz. But these guys who are the students right now, that's their realm. And they can really impress and step up and shine right now in helping newsrooms and news outlets go, let me show you how this works. Let me show you how we can make this happen and how easy it is. So don't be afraid to speak up, even if your 50-year-old boss has a ton of awards on his shelf and stuff like that. But I don't know everything, and I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I've worked my butt off. I want other people to now step up to the plate like I did 30 years ago and shine and show me how to do things and make it easy. So
to Jean's point on the chat, finding sources that you don't already have a relationship with, I think it's a good question. But social media is fertile ground. I mean, you can absolutely crowdsource, put a question out there. Hey, I'm looking for somebody, either on Twitter or on Facebook or TikTok. Yeah, whatever that is. I'm working on a story on X. Anyone out there who has a story to share or wants to talk, you can DM me if you don't want to do it publicly. I mean, give people options and your contact information. You'd be surprised the number of sources that come through for you.
And also one thing to add, if I could, is that especially this is something that all journalists do and should be trying to do, but especially for student journalists who are in a different position than someone working at a daily or one of the other news outlets in the state, is try and find stories that no one else is telling. The Tribune is telling great stories, but there are some stories they're not telling, and the Park Record is not telling all the stories, and there are stories out there that students have a different perspective on and are going to be able to find and even come up with an idea that is completely different than what anyone else is doing, and that's a valuable perspective and a valuable area of coverage that students are kind of uniquely suited to tell. So don't be afraid to think out the box and dig into something that no one else is digging into.
Yeah, very good. I was kind of curious too, if the panelists could recommend some resources. I mean, one of the interesting things about this era we're in now is how much stuff we've talked about before is going to technology, it's streaming, and I know we have some attendees now who've maybe never joined an SPJ event because they're not on the Wasatch Front, southern Utah or other parts of the state. And kind of curious to know what resources you guys are aware of that they might be able to share with their readers in their community that they might not have had access to before. Some of the things that come to my mind off the top of my head, I know that, in Salt Lake, there's a lot of arts events and film and plays, and there are people that being unable to do an event, they're doing stuff streaming. And I don't know if the panelists could recommend any things that are online now that weren't before, that could use more advertising. George, you want to start? Any thoughts? Anyone got any suggestions there? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not sure I really follow the question, Eric. So what's the point that you're looking at? Would I'm not sure what you're asking.
Oh, just like, if there are, like arts and culture things that are, online now that like anybody in the state could enjoy.
I think everybody's trying to be really creative with, like I said, where before businesses are scrambling to keep awareness about them first and foremost. Those that just haven't had to completely shut down, want to let people know that they're open for business. So they're reaching out to us to make sure that, hey, let us know. And I think as the media, we have to balance as a business or a nonprofit organization of how we are able to stay afloat and in business. We have to mix that with also our role as the informer and and public service to help support the economy and keep things going. So I think we look for ways to I don't know if I'm really addressing your answer, or your question, but I think we're really just looking constantly for ways to continue to inform. We're also entertainment providers, whether that's reading the features or reading the sports or watching a show like Good Things Utah or Studio 5 or Fresh Living or whatever. I think we're still trying to find ways to do things that are still normal. Oof, I hate that word, but trying to do things that are there. I don't know. Sorry if I didn't really.
No, I should have offered my standard disclaimer that I'm a writer, not a talker. I was just trying to pick the panelists' brains about, resources that used to, maybe just were events, sporting events, cultural things, anything like that you've noticed, unique ways that you're getting content that you weren't before, that you might be able to share with our attendees.
I think somebody mentioned earlier, now is a really great time to do. There's a lot of great entertainers, local, national, that are kind of got some time on their hands. Now's a great time where normally you'd call up a jazz player and they're like, dude, I got this going on, I got that, I don't have time for an interview. I bet they do now. Or whoever, Post Malone, well, he's got a little trouble that he's dealing with, but hey Post, let's do a feature on how you're getting through this. I mean, I think now's a great time to reach out to people and do some of those in-depth things. What about those actresses or actors over at Salt Lake Acting Company or Hale Center Theater? How are they getting through this and that kind of stuff? I think those are great features to start doing right now, and because they're not in a show or have anything to promote right now doesn't mean they wouldn't still be an interesting story.
And I think if you watch social media, I mean, you've got museums that are doing virtual tours now. You've got the just down the road from me, you've got the aquarium, you've got the zoo, that are all really trying to stay active on social media. And I think passing that on to our viewers, our readers, I think that's part of the content, it's part of the entertainment that George talked about. And I think if we can let folks know, I mean, there might be somebody, down in Cedar City that hasn't been up to Hogle Zoo in a dozen years. And if we can tell the story about how they're doing that, even if we don't go there to tell the story, but we, link off to their pages, that's one way to, get that content to them.
Yes.
You can watch Channel 4's weather, shameless plug, and see what the zebras and the giraffes are doing right now.
There you go.
We have a camera in the African safari or whatever it is.
One thing I wanted to suggest us as well that I noticed a lot more is when we get our news tips to both KSL and Deseret News, we're getting a lot of much more uplifting videos and people trying to, just raise everybody's spirits. And I think that's good now that people have more time to kind of reach out and see like, hey, maybe this can turn into whether it's to our uplifting section that we have on .com, or we just turn it into a different kind of story. But to Chuck's point as well with social media, I've also noticed that a lot more businesses are doing more live videos and they're trying to just get more aware, and which is great because we want to support our local small businesses. But at least for me, I've noticed a lot more of videos and they're showing how they're preparing food or this, and they're showing that they're wearing the gloves and they're doing everything, and they're just saying, you can take it out to your car, and which, I mean, I get it. It's tough times and they're trying to do whatever they can to get the attention, but those are good ideas. Also, if your writers are looking for something like a feature, this might be a time to do, a feature on a local story, and not just the sad aspect of of what's going on in the sense of the business struggling, but maybe you turn it into something like, yeah, this business is struggling right now, but they've had a history of this and they've been here for so many years. But, yes, we have to cover the aspect of, what's going on every day and the numbers, et cetera. But it's also our responsibility as well to find the uplifting things and to let people know that, even though we're in a tough time right now, we'll get through it eventually. I think it's that, we don't know when. And that makes it obviously very tough because we're in a waiting game now. But for now, it's also part of our responsibility to give a balance on both sides.
I think one thing that we've tried to do is that thirst, that public need for resources, we've actually turned into a couple of new products. We created a kids page, kids club on sltrib.com with resources to, the zoo and other educational kind of institutions here in the state, and highlight the resources that they have, and keeping kids connected to their community at a hard time. The other thing that we've done is we noticed that our audience really wanted to know more about restaurants, food, grocery stores, all of that became paramount. So a few weeks ago, we launched a new newsletter called Utah Eats. It's around food, and it's a daily, it comes out every day. We've got thousands of people who have already subscribed. And so I think that journalism can find ways to channel that information from the community directly to the people who want it and need it.
Anyone else on that front? Bubba, anything to add there, or?
A little bit different focus, but we, Jennifer, kind of jumping on what you're talking about regarding people wanting to know about business closures and restaurants that are offering dine-in or curbside service and all of that stuff. I know newspapers and media outlets across the country have done ideas like this of updating lists about which places are still open, but we put together actually a landing page where businesses and restaurants themselves can input their own information about hours and new services they're offering, and we of course moderate it, but so businesses and residents in our community can kind of view that as one resource to find information about all businesses that are still operating or closed right now.
Oh, very nice. I was going to ask everyone, have you guys faced any challenges in terms of access, if that's either to like meetings or just access to a public official, or even, I don't know, even documents and maybe like grandma requests, things like that? I know I recently had filed a grandma and a couple, and I've started noticing, especially from smaller government agencies, I'm getting a response saying that, emergency situation, the time to respond is getting pushed back. Actually, filed one recently that I thought was a little pointed, and I was told it was going to take at least 60 days to respond. And it's a tough situation. I'm not sure if it's even worth challenging. I mean, that's a hard argument to go against. And I guess I'm kind of curious to know if that roadblock has been applied in other situations. I don't know, has anyone seen anything like that? Jennifer, have you guys seen anything like that?
Yeah, we've boosted a lot of grammar requests in the last month, just to keep shining a light and maintaining the transparency. I think a good case in point is the state legislature. They recently had this group conference call, and everybody was invited except for the public. So we did a story on that. We're very closely looking at the special session that starts today, to make sure that there is transparency. As part of the Utah Media Coalition, we sent a letter to lawmakers saying, look, if there's public comment, we need access to that. And I think there's a little bit of nervous anxiety with our team, just how much is flying under the radar now that people are not meeting together in the open. So that's something that we're definitely looking at. So far we are getting grandma requests fulfilled. So I don't know, Eric, maybe they just didn't like your letter. I don't know, but I do think the government is operating more slowly for sure, because everybody's working from home and they have the dog and the baby and all the distractions that come with that and domestic environment. So, it's definitely something that I'm concerned about. Our team is working to make sure that public business is public.
Anyone else seen any kind of resistance or difficulty getting access?
Eric, a different kind of access was within the first couple of days, the University of Utah rolled out at one of their medical clinics. They did a demonstration of what the drive-up testing was going to look like. Our photographers went out there, both TV and still, and this was on a Friday. And as the Deseret News photographer was shooting, he noticed a van get kind of motioned in a direction to the side of the building, and so he took a few steps to his right or his left, and sure enough, two people came out, gowned up, masked up, and did the swab test. He shot that, and then they immediately kind of seized on the opportunity to say, "You can't use that." To which we said, "That's absolutely crazy. We are in a public space. You've invited us here." They tried to cite HIPAA, and they tried to say, we pushed back on them hard, and ultimately ran that photo. But the University of Utah has been very difficult in terms of access that we've been given. And I know I've talked to my counterpart Jeremy Harmon at the Tribune, and we've bounced a lot of ideas back and forth. He's been super helpful in that respect, and we've really tried to team when we can, try and if we need to send a strongly worded email or letter. I think Jennifer sent one off to the U that when they sent out their, I think it was a Saturday night or a Sunday night email saying, respectfully, we don't want you guys to be around when we're doing our drive-up testing. And I think we all said that, no, this is public, and we're going to be there to tell that story both visually and otherwise. So that's been a little difficult to, especially, and disappointing, coming from a university facility. But we've been able to work around
similar resistance from Intermountain, and I don't know if you have as well. I mean, it's resulting in a lot of conversations, making sure that people understand our role. We're not out to get people. We don't want to invade people's privacy. Yep. On the other hand, if somebody is masked and you can't really identify them anyway, and they are visible from a public space, I don't know how you can condemn the role that journalists play in telling this important story. I've been grateful for the solidarity, Chuck, with you and your team, just to make sure that we make sure that institutions don't forget that the media does play an important role in this pandemic.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and there's what you guys are pointing out. I think it's important to make sure that those institutions know that part of calming people down is showing the process. And I think that's exactly what your team is trying to do. And on one hand, they can't have it both ways, because they ask us to share the information and show what they're doing so that they can get the credibility and the reputation of, look what we're doing. But then when we say, well, we are becoming such, television has always been in this boat, and print is going that way along with the age of digital as well. We are visual mediums, and we have to be able to describe and show things. So, it's very strange, but I think in our broadcast world as well, we've seen a little bit of pushback because everyone, and I think you said it, Chuck, or Jennifer, they hide behind the HIPAA laws and say this is so sensitive, and you're like, well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It is one of these things that there's some interesting discussions happening, figuring out how to go forward with these kinds of stories. Also, just want to throw out there as well, like, if you, any attendance, anybody, if you are feeling resistance from doing your job and, feel like it's unfair, as somebody, using this crisis to just arbitrarily block access to a meeting, to documents, anything like that, please let us know at SPJ. I'm also at the Utah Media Coalition. We want to know about these things so we can put our resources to, having that conversation with those gatekeepers and making sure they know, what's acceptable and what's not, and what our mission is in trying to cover all aspects of this pandemic.
Can I ask a question of the fellow panelists? Because I'm starting to hear from my team some resistance just from the public that we're part of the problem. We're hyping. I didn't ask for my picture to be taken when I was outside. That kind of thing. So I'm curious if you're also. This is a high anxiety time. I totally get it. But are people more reluctant to interact with your media teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. Who wants to go? George, do you want to go on that one first?
No.
Maybe
Go to Chuck first.
I have not had anybody. I mean, we've had people that have said we don't want to be photographed. That's I think kind of, that's happened to us even before the pandemic. If we happen to be shooting a weather picture out at Liberty Park or something, that might be the case. I have not had anybody come back directly to me and say, we're part of the problem, or I'm sure that's out there. Of course, that's out there. But unfortunately, we have not had experienced anything like that yet. Knock on wood.
Yeah, and the reason I was hesitant is because I'm not in the newsroom every day to day, so I'm not 100% sure what kind of reaction you're getting. But I did just have some conversations yesterday with some of our news photographers that say that some of the people that are in the field a little bit more, the feedback, we actually kind of get some positive praise saying, hey, thank you for walking the talk, showing the physical distancing, and we, pointing out, well, this is our dilemma, and maybe this talks to a little bit, Jennifer. You guys, I'm sure, are getting these too, but we get a ton of email, not a ton, but we get emails saying, hey, I noticed this gathering of whatever type last night. Don't you think we should expose that? I want to remain anonymous. And you're like, well, where'd you get that video of 40 people together celebrating this thing and all that kind of stuff? So those kind of things are, I think those are tricky, and I'm not quite sure how to respond to that, because my initial response as a human being is going, how effing stupid are you people? And B, yeah, I really want to show these idiots and say, thank you. You just kept us in social distancing for another 2 weeks because 6 of you are going to walk away with the virus now, or whatever. I don't know.
I would say the positive feedback absolutely outnumbers the small things, but I am starting to hear some resistance, particularly when you're documenting people who are not observing the rules of the day. There's been gatherings at the Capitol, and there's gatherings at parks, and so those interactions, people really don't want to be outed, I guess.
Right.
And so they blame the messenger in some regards. But I would say, I agree with you, George. The fan mail definitely has been coming in. People are relying on local media in a way that I don't think they have in a long time. They've appreciated it. For so long, people have just taken it for granted. And now they are so hungry for knowledge, for information, the latest, whatever. context that we can provide. So yeah, I don't want to say that the public doesn't appreciate the efforts.
What I've really appreciated is I just saw some feedback come in this morning from somebody who, at the top of all of our newscasts, we always start with the latest numbers, internationally, nationally, locally, of the number of cases versus hospitalizations, death toll, and recovery as well. And it seemed like about 2 weeks ago, people, or maybe a week and a half ago, doesn't it feel, I mean, it feels like this has been going on forever. So I'm a little lost to time, but maybe a little over a week ago, the feedback came back and saying, okay, I need you to start talking about recoveries and who's getting better and things like that. So there was that kind of thing coming back from people. But this one person emailed us earlier today saying, I really love your numbers, and it was so interesting to show that they appreciated and they were engaged and actually were paying attention, because they're like, I've been doing the math. I've been following your numbers every day and doing the math and this and this. Hey, I think we're starting to near that curve now where if the numbers continue this way. So it was really interesting to see that kind of a feedback from them. But then a few minutes later, we get another email going, enough of the numbers. They're overwhelming. I'm freaking out. I can't do this. Then you get that email with the person saying, instead, focus on these stupid people who are going off and 20 of them are at a party. So yeah, it's anyway. But I mean, what do you guys think about what do we do with those videos when they come in? And, how do you handle that?
For me personally, I know since Chuck and I, we get a lot of the same emails, being in the same newsroom. Yeah, like we are getting a lot more people are saying, there was so-and-so and they have this video or they have this, why aren't they paying attention? I think it's the frustration, obviously, of being indoors, the frustration of everything, of hearing the bad news every day is starting to boil to some people and saying, I'm gonna get you. I see you, and now I want this sort of justice. And for at least for I think for all of us, like that's not our mission to go out and to try to get people. That's not what we're doing. And I mean, I guess I understand why the frustration and why they feel like if they do see even 10 people outside together, why that frustration is there, because we're all frustrated. But I have seen, to George's point, in the past probably week and a half, or almost two now, it's this tide of now, people want justice or the numbers. We do get a lot of tips and emails that are saying, people, can you guys focus on the people recovered, because you guys are part of the problem or whatever. And it's just like, you don't necessarily reply back anything. You just kind of take it and just and move on. But one thing I have also noticed as well is the whole opening up the governments, and it feels like it's the wave is starting to kind of come up in the sense of people that wanting the economy to reopen and everything, which obviously you could get into a long debate of like when should that happen and etc. But I think that's kind of beginning to just start to wave up on all of us, is that push. I think we had a story just last night posted about St. George and a group of people that are actually protesting the governor and his stay home, stay safe initiative, because they want the economy back open. And so it's like, all right, we don't want to ignore these people, but how do we find that balance out? Because it's a balance of, yes, there is economic damage, but there's also the safety. And for most of us, I think we agree safety and the health is number one. But there are certain people that feel like that time is beginning to pass and we need to start moving forward. Politicians included as well are feeling like that. So it's tough to navigate, and it's a lot of conversation with your writers. It's a lot of conversation with, whether it's my news director or the other managers that I have on my team, to see kind of how to balance it out, because we want people's voices to be heard. But at the same time, we don't want to get into this game like a propaganda game of back and forth.
Well, that's exactly what it seems like. It seems like to reopen or not reopen the economy issue is our new impeach or not to impeach
right
partisan topic. Honestly, it's like we've got to be very careful not to fall into, unless we're going to be opinion journalism, we've got to be really careful about trying to stay focused on what's at stake and what the issues are on all all levels. Because honestly, the economy, that is a huge story. And that is a huge, huge story. And that's going to be our big, big story for a long time as we recover and everything. But it does seem like that's where the talk shows and the opinion journalism are really starting the fires now. And like you said, I think it's Wisconsin that had that crazy protest of the governor there,
Yeah.
and crowds gathered and stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see.
That was my hometown of Lansing, Michigan, and I'm so proud of those folks there for jumping out and doing that. But to Joel's point, I mean, we're not the police. We're not. I mean, I'm super uncomfortable airing, posting videos for that tattletale nature. But if it is a organized protest like that, obviously that becomes news, and I think that's when we should have it out there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would anytime we've gotten an email or a video or whatever of people gathering, the number one decision we make about whether we want to pursue this as a story or whatever is simply, is it newsworthy? In Summit County, our smaller community, if it's 10 people sitting in a driveway, that's not newsworthy. If it were 100 people gathering, which has not happened because people have done pretty good about following the stay-at-home order here, then that would obviously be newsworthy. Or if there was something like police involvement or something like that, that changes the newsworthy equation also. The biggest area of pushback that we've gotten in our coverage, kind of across the board, is some people frustrated that we're not providing more granular information about cases in terms of, were these cases happening in Park City, or are they Kimball Junction, or are they Colville? Where are the cases happening? And we've got to explain, we're reporting the information that the health officials are giving us. We're not gatekeeping, information that we think might be newsworthy that we're just sitting on and have. Our reporting is based on what the health officials are telling us. And also, this has kind of died off a little bit as the number of cases has grown. But early on, we encountered a lot of resistance about the fact that health officials were not naming the people who had been infected and kind of detailing publicly every place they had been and any contacts they may have had. And so, again, we had to explain, number one, they're not giving us that information. And number two, a really important consideration was simply the fact that people who were infected did not commit a crime. They in 99.9% of cases, they did nothing wrong. They were not out trying to hurt anybody. And so it was really important to consider them as human beings rather than people who have done something wrong.
Excellent. I want to make sure we have the panelists answer a question from our attendees, and this might be our last one, but just want to get everyone's take. How do you think that this pandemic is going to permanently change the journalism industry? And if so, how? Jennifer, do you want to start off on that one?
I think that it has shown my newsroom that we can do this. We can do this remotely, that we can still be not physically in the same space and produce really high quality stories, that we can be creative and that we can be mission driven and audience focused and all of that, and not be in the same building. So in that regard, I would expect more people to ask for flexibility. I expect my staff to say, hey, I need to stay home for the plumber. I'm still working. You okay with that? And of course, we've proven that this can work. As far as new sensibilities, I do think that people are going to take advantage of this technology in new ways. I think Zoom is going to be incorporated as part of the daily reporting toolbox now. I think that crowdsourcing and reaching out on social media will become even more of a place where we can find trusted voices and sources for the reporting. So, in those ways, I think it's all positive. On the downside, I think there is some financial uncertainty. And we all have to sort of live with those consequences. As the economy has suffered, so have individual newsrooms. Our advertising has gone way down. And I think that's, will people come back? That's a lingering question that is out there. So I think that, yes, fundamentally, the news industry is going to change, but we will survive. We will incorporate the lessons that we've learned going forward.
What about you, Bubba? What's your take?
Yeah, I think that something like this, I mean, is going to change every aspect of life, and certainly newsrooms as well. My staff, I think we are better than we were a month and a half ago. I think just by kind of the going through this fire has necessitated growth in some areas, and again, kind of highlighted the fact that we can do some things that we didn't think that we could necessarily do before this, and so that's really encouraging. And again, on the downside is there are going to be news outlets that don't survive this, and then there have been across the country. There are a bunch of news outlets that are in financial distress right now, and the positive side of that, though, is something like this really highlights the role that the news media plays. It makes communities really grateful for what we do in our community and how we serve them. And I think that oftentimes people can take us for granted and support their news institutions and like what we do and all that stuff, but not really be vocal about it or step out in any way and support us. And I think something like this has really shined a light on that we need support, and that anything that people could do, whether it's subscribing or picking up the paper or whatever, that we need as much help as we can get, because we're only going to be around as long as people support us.
Yeah, amen on that. Chuck, what do you think about permanent change?
So, to echo Bubba's and Jennifer's points, I mean, the technology and what we've been able to do with it in a short period of time, changing our workflows, changing, how we communicate, all very positive. I mean, I think, certainly it is amazing that we've been able to churn out the products that we have, whether it's broadcast or print or digital. I worry a little bit about, I certainly worry about the economics of our industry, no question about that. But I kind of worry about the loss of intimacy of storytelling. When we, I mean, this is great. What we're doing right now is fantastic. We're reaching, 3 or 4 dozen people in this discussion today. It's fantastic. But I also miss the intimacy. I miss the camaraderie that we talked about earlier in the newsroom. I worry about losing the intimacy of storytelling with our subjects, and photographers by nature. That's my background is photojournalism. We like to get up close and personal, and now we're, as we talked earlier, we're having to change the way we do things with the longer lenses and shooting in through windows. And but I even miss. I worry that we're going to get to a point where, I hope that this doesn't come to this, but we're not sitting down in somebody's living room and having that conversation with somebody. That I guess I worry that that part of it, technology changes, and somebody has the option to say, no, I'd rather Zoom our interview than have you come and sit in my living room.
Yeah, good point. Shoel, what do you think about permanent changes with the industry?
I think if a lot of local news outlets didn't have an emphasis on breaking news, this has helped out a lot for them to put more of that emphasis. I know obviously for us, we've always had that, and it's good to see others outlets obviously as well continue to beef up theirs. Like, it's having more is always good. I do worry about obviously the economic aspect of it for our industry. I have 2 friends in California who about 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago, they were laid off their freelancing jobs because I had another friend ask, well, wouldn't they be in more demand because they can just work remotely? It's like, well, no, because they're actually going to be the first ones cut. For certain companies, they'll cut them first. Like, this will cut the freelancers first. So that's unfortunate, and it's unfortunate to see whether it's other websites, other just industry, websites, or it's newspaper take cuts. I do think that this will open up more the idea of the whole, and I think it was Jennifer brought this up, just kind of working at home. and being able to do quality work at home to highlight it. So that I do see as a positive, but I could also see it as a negative to kind of what Chuck's point is like, there could be a lot of people from now and said, you know what, you could just interview me, here, and I'll be here and that'll be fine. And I think even after this virus, I think there will be more people that'll open up more to the idea of, you know what, I think we could all get this done with Zoom or Google Hangouts or whatever. And so it's kind of that double-edged sword of like, the people producing the work will be able to be, we know that they're going to be able to do it fine at home, but when it's you having to go, whether it's the interview or getting photos or getting things like that, obviously that's gonna take a hit, because now you can do it at home, and now we could see that maybe it's not the same quality of being in person, but you still get some good quality. So that I have mixed feelings about that, to say the least.
Yeah. George, what do you think about this? What is the lasting mark of the pandemic on how journalism is done?
I think what everybody's brought up is absolutely spot on. There's the pros and cons of everything, but for me, I've just kind of, as I've been listening to everybody's feedback and trying to process where I feel like things are going to go, I think there's going to be an immediate reaction once this is kind of over. And who knows, is this really going to be over? We're already talking about, we talked about this in our SBJ meeting the other day when we were talking about trying to reschedule our regional our regional conference and everything. We might be looking at something similar to this fall again, another resurgence. So, but I think what the lasting lessons will be are that we are as an industry resilient, resourceful, and innovative. And I think the most important thing will be that I'm super excited to see is the innovations and the things that come out of this, as people aren't scurrying to do the day-to-day with what's existing now, but they're like, back when we were doing COVID-19, this was a challenge I had every day, and I figured out how we can work around that next time. So I'm super excited to see what the next step is in how we as an industry evolve and come up with some innovations to help us for this, whether that's again this fall or next spring when the next pandemic comes along or whatever. So yeah. I think there's a lot of pros and cons, and I'm choosing to be a little bit more optimistic. We have to remember that during the last recession, we lost a lot of our friends and people in the industry to layoffs and furloughs, but then we kind of evolved and, like Madonna, reinvented ourselves a little bit and became, I had to get that in there, and became, some of our newsrooms built up a little bit, some of us became a whole different entity. And I think it's just part of growing up and going through this process. So I'm excited to see what happens. Excellent. You can't stop the future. It's coming regardless.
Yeah, excellent. Can't stop the future. Look to Madonna as your inspiration.
With TikTok, apparently.
What's that?
With TikTok.
With TikTok.
Yeah, Marcy, if Jane, I'm looking at the comments, if Jane Fonda can do TikTok at 82 years old.
All righty. I think we're about out of time. I just want to thank everyone for doing this. This was a really great discussion. I've been recording. I'm hoping it's all saved there, and we'll be able to put this up online soon for anyone that couldn't join us today or had to step out. And like I said before, SPJ, reach out to us if you need help, if you're having trouble with access or anything like that. Don't forget, we've got a contest coming up. We'd love to see those entries coming in so we can celebrate your great work. And with that, I'm just going to say thank you to all our panelists, all our attendees, and we'll call it a webinar. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Stay healthy, everybody.
Stay
safe.
Bye.